the U.S. Constitution, specifically the Fifth Amendment, as well as language throughout the Constitution, provides protections for immigrants, whether they are legal or not. I'm going to be
It's almost like whenever we dehumanize people, it makes it really easy to pack them onto planes and ship them off to foreign prisons that are eerily reminiscent of concentration
and
camps.
like, well, if you know it's a slippery slope, then why the hell are you skating on the damn thing? The bullshit of if they'll just do it right is the argument is null and void at that moment. A lot of these
Right.
people that have been picked up are doing it right. They are.
It's like, what is how many times are we going to do these Olympic level mental gymnastics to justify this as being okay?
I'm just going to start calling it the platform of hate and fear. And I really think that we need to push that out more aggressively, that
Yeah,
it's hate and fear. We either follow the Constitution and the rule of law, or we are following fascism and dictatorship.
right.
There's no middle ground here.
You're fucking A right we are. You guys are trying to violate the document that has been like the founding principle for our country for 250 plus years. Like, yeah, people are fucking being violent, pissed off.
We either follow the Constitution and the rule of law, or we devolve and follow and support a fascist dictatorship. The reason that we have the Constitution and the rule of law are bumpers. These are bumpers to keep us from devolving into chaos, anarchy, fascism, dictatorship, which are all of those are based on the whims of whoever's in charge. I don't like people with green eyes, so take them out and shoot them to
Yeah,
Salvador. We are at the very fringes of living in a fascist state.
right.
I think that if this doesn't get your attention, this Fifth Amendment discussion we're having, if the First Amendment discussion, if none of these discussions get your attention, I hope you enjoy fascism and dictatorship. What bothers me, I want you to explain to me why you're okay with someone not having basic civil rights. You don't get to decide
Because they're criminals,
because they're
Mom.
criminals, because they're terrorists, because, well, okay, so no.
How do we know that? That's the next
That's
that's
what
the
this
next follow-up
process is
question.
for.
Yeah.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Hopeful Resistance. My name is Sarah, and this is my son, Aaron.
Hi.
And we are back again talking about all things hopeful, all things resistance. And Aaron always decides what it is we talk about each week. And so, Aaron, what's the topic for the week?
This week, I wanted to talk about the Fifth Amendment. I wanted to talk about how that relates to a very, I guess, a big topic that's kind of been all over social media, no matter which social media you partake in, and a lot of people's hot takes about what they think is constitutional or not.
So many.
Many things, but I
We've
mean,
all seen
I've been consuming so much content this week. A lot of it has been actually about the tariffs, which we can talk about in some other time. But this week, the one that I've really been hitting on with a lot of my friends, with a lot of my not friends, is this particular circumstance and the potential for, well, I don't know if I think we're already in a constitutional crisis, but the potential for a very legitimate constitutional crisis.
it's ironic that you would pick that. I have had some of the most bizarre discussions this week. So, for anybody who doesn't know, because clearly on both sides of the fence, there are a bunch of people that do not realize that the US Constitution, specifically the Fifth Amendment, as well as language throughout the Constitution, provides protections for immigrants, whether they are legal or not. The
Yeah.
protections depending on your status, whether you committed a crime or if simply the misdemeanor, the civil violation, not a different kind of violation, a civil misdemeanor of entering the country illegally, and the due process that is afforded you. I'd like to address your issue, or not your issue, your take on the Constitution. But anyway, So yeah, Fifth
Yeah, I
Amendment
mean,
be a big thing.
there's
Start with that.
yeah, yeah. So I want to actually read the amendment like as it's written in the Constitution, so that we're really clear cut on what the Fifth Amendment is. So the Fifth Amendment is grand jury, double jeopardy, self-incrimination, due process, and takings. And it reads as follows: No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, which basically means if you're in the military. We'll summarize this later, but nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall nor shall be compelled in any other criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So that's as it's written, which is like,
Right.
I get it. It's like
Sure. That your average,
constitutional.
and let's be honest, your average person is not
Yeah.
constantly aware of that. I'd like to start with some of the interesting two things that I've had conversations about this week. One, people on both sides of the issue, the Trump supporters, I'm just going to call it Trump supporters and MAGA, don't know it's there. Or in the case of one particular individual that I'm talking to, they don't think that we should comply, that only citizens should have rights. And then the second thing is, how do I say this nicely?
You don't have to say it nicely, but I get you.
Hey, you have pointed out many times that the Constitution does not give us basic human rights,
Correct.
that it promises to protect those human rights. And I think one of the benchmarks of the United States is that it has historically, until January 20th of 2025, was I don't know if beacon is the right word, but was known, uh, I believe, for as being a country that respected the individual rights of human beings. And so I think that this particular administration is weaponizing hate and is
I,
now ignoring the Constitution. So I would love to hear your take on what do we do now, boo boo?
so so I want to go back to the thing, because you hit on so many different things. And one of the main things that I really, really want people to understand, if you don't know anything, recognize one thing: the rights that you have, your right to freedom of speech, your right to, we in the United States, they have it as the right to bear arms, but it is the right to protect yourself, to more simply put, the right to practice any religion that you want, right? The right to your life, liberty, and property, pursuit of happiness, etc. All of those rights are inherent. They're meaning for, I use that word a lot, but it means that you're born with them. They're your rights. They belong to you. There
Because
is nothing that,
because you're human.
yes. And I mean the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, it says that these rights are given to you by God. However you want it to be, whether it's God given to you, it doesn't matter. They're yours inherently. And what the Constitution set out to do, besides establish the way that our government should operate, is it listed out the rights that the government would protect. Now, some of those rights I think were given. I was talking to a friend of mine that works in law, and he helped me kind of see that, like, for example, women's suffrage. Those are rights
These,
granted.
I think they're granted, but I also think that there are additional rights given to citizens. You have the right to vote, you have the right to do things in this country because you're a citizen. But what we're talking about for purposes of this show are the rights you have because you're a human being.
Yes.
I've seen the word animal used, and I think the villainization of immigrants is the just like they would during slavery, they're animalizing and vilifying, back during the Civil War, black people, they're to justify the treatment. And we're doing the exact
It's
thing right now.
it's almost like somebody else did this. Gosh, and it was had to have been within the last 100
Yes,
years, and I'm pretty sure there was
it
this like
has something to do
really big world event that surrounded this thing.
with a guy with that funny little,
Yeah, he had the
oh
weird
yeah,
facial hair.
Nazis. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
how
almost
could we
like
forget?
whenever we dehumanize people, it makes it really easy to pack them onto planes and ship them off to foreign prisons that are eerily reminiscent of concentration
Well,
camps.
and I mean, let's be honest, the Supreme Court, this is, I will tell you my conundrum this week. The fact that you picked this is so serendipitous. My conundrum this week is the A, shock and dismay that I feel that liberals don't know. They're just supporting immigrant rights because they think it's the right thing to do, but they don't even realize that it's something in some of them don't realize it's in the Constitution.
Yeah,
But on the flip side, the absolute, like I had a man that I know in my neighborhood. He wasn't trolling or anything. He absolutely thought that I was just expressing my opinion about the Fifth Amendment rights for immigrants. Now, I think we should also pause for a moment and point out that the rights of immigrants are limited and the rights of illegal immigrants or immigrants who are not documented are even less, but they still have the right to due process.
right. It's
We have
and
limited those rights
yeah.
because of hate and fear. And I will constantly drill on that the current administration's platform is pure hate and pure fear.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And the other side of this, because of your point that like immigrants' rights and citizens' rights are different. It's it's in my head. It's not that they're different. It's that they're under equal protection, right? Under the Constitution. Citizens aren't granted rights by the Constitution, or non-citizens aren't granted right by the Constitution. For example, your point of the right to vote. That's not a grant. They're not granted the right to vote in the United States. Now, some people would say that they are. They're not. Okay. They're not allowed to vote here. But they are protected, yeah, for due process. They are protected the right to free speech because like, you have these immigrant students that are being
And I think that's really, I think if we hone in on anything, the right to due process.
yeah,
I, I am
because it's
mystified.
the Fifth Amendment we want to focus. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, because it is the Fifth Amendment that we're focusing on. So
Right. At the Fifth Amendment, it does talk about quite a few things, but due process, I think, is the word, the thought of the week. And what I don't understand is why the people who are more than happy to strip the right to due process from those people don't recognize that there were US citizens in the last 7 days that were picked up and denied due process that just happened to be freed because people were on the alert and caught the fact that these were US citizens that had been picked up. So, I mean,
right,
it's a slippery slope. And actually, one of the men I talked to this week, he says, I know it's a slippery slope. I'm like, well, if you know it's a slippery slope, then why the hell are you skating on the damn thing?
yeah. Well, and I would even in my mind, I I feel like if we allow the slippery slope argument instead of like blatantly pointing out that taking these people without due process is unconstitutional, like we're enabling them to reach the next logical step, which is to start hauling off American criminals to foreign
Which has
entities.
been
Just
actually brought
yeah,
before the
here, yeah.
Supreme Court. I think it's really important that we understand that the US government, like this is April the 20th of 2025. And in this month, the United States government brought before the Supreme Court their justification of why they should be able to pick up any person, citizen or not, anytime, anywhere for anything. And thank you, baby Jesus, that the Supreme Court went,
No.
is this a trick? Like, is this a trick question?
You're like, what?
I
Absolutely
mean,
not.
I will say, if you would have told me, um, that I'd have been glad for some of the Trump appointed constitutionalists that were, who knew? I mean, the fact that we have constitutionalists on the Supreme Court that we bitched and moaned about the fact that they were Trumpers. I think at this moment, I'm grateful that they at least are adhering to the, constitutional guidelines.
Yeah. I mean, it's
So
one of those things. No,
thanks.
yeah, but it is also because it is one of those things that I have a friend that works in law, and I have talked to him about a lot of things. And then it's interesting whenever we talk about like the constitutionality of things and how um like the one that we talked about a lot was like the pro-life pro-choice debate that one of the reasons that him and I have talked about why that's never going to go away is because Congress doesn't want to pass an amendment to resolve that issue because they want to be able to use it as a tool to get elected.
Well, it's a
We
hot,
don't have to go down like that rabbit hole, but that there's tons of things that could
it's
be
a,
easily
it's a flash,
solved.
it's an absolute flashpoint. It is, if I want you to like me, y- yes,
Yeah.
let's not even go down that hole.
Yeah, that's a long path. But on this due process thing, I mean, I actually it's one of those things where I was like, look, okay, if we if he had gone through the process of like taking them to court and having them tried and having them found guilty and then shipped them off to El Salvador, I still wouldn't be okay with it.
No,
It would just be a totally different argument about is he violating the
exactly.
Constitution?
It's well, and I mean, so many things. Okay,
Hmm.
so let's go down that road. Ha I think let's back up just a little.
Yeah.
The argument from MAGA is if they would just do it right, if they just do it legally. Okay, so this guy since 2019, and we're talking about Abrego Garcia,
Right.
to be clear, um, he since 2019 has been protected by a court order
Yeah.
that he could not be, that he had permanent asylum
Right.
and could not be deported. He was checking in regularly, and I would like to just put a little footnote. And I'm thinking as he checked in regularly, somebody somewhere in the office might have noticed if he'd have gotten tattoos on his fingers, but I'm okay. I'm open to being wrong on that.
Well, go ahead, because I looked into this too. This is like I said, I pulled up a bunch of notes before the.
Oh, Photoshop? Oh, so wait, we'll come.
No, no, no. I'm sorry. It's not like that. So there, and I can send you these articles so we
Wait,
can put
let's
them
go
in the
back. Hang on.
description.
Let's go
Sorry.
back. Since 2019, he
Yeah.
is protected by a court order that uh, I believe it was permanent asylum, could not be deported. He was checking in regularly with his immigration office, and he was actually picked up at the immigration office and deported without any due process. So the bullshit of if they'll just do it right is the argument is null and void at that moment. A lot of these
Right.
people that have been picked up are doing it right. They have immigration
Right.
appointment, hearings and all that. Now, so to so many
There's
things.
so many things. Yeah.
So to the point of due process, he received none, but the argument that you make or that you brought up is if they picked him up, they gave him notice of a hearing, went to a hearing, he lost the hearing. I'm sorry, and wait, oh wait, there was evidence of the
Right.
MS-13.
That's where that's where stuff's gonna break down, right? Is like that's why they don't that's why he didn't get due process because if we
He
had
didn't
taken
get
him
the
through,
process.
yeah, if we had taken him through the due process,
And
there wouldn't they don't have anything.
if you read any of the court rulings and the MAGA people who say there's been two court rulings, no, there was evidence presented and I've looked this up. There's evidence
Yeah.
in two different court cases that is nothing but hearsay. That the court did not admit it as evidence. It was presented as evidence.
Right.
Supreme Court, if there had been any of this stuff, they would have at least acknowledged it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and you're hitting on all the stuff that I was going to bring up. I mean, there there's no evidence there's no evidence that he committed any crimes, yeah, that he committed any crimes here in the United States. There's no evidence that he committed any crimes in El Salvador, which for those that don't know, I mean, MS-13 started here, but they are big in El Salvador. Because they were originally like a 1980s partisan gang, except we can get there's a long history of gangs in the United States, and MS-13 is one of the larger ones and does have a very long history. You can find great content on YouTube that actually walks down the historical path of the creation of these gangs and how they came into power and where they get their drugs and blah blah blah. So we've got a guy who we have no records of committing any crimes, having gone to court for doing any crimes, nothing in anywhere about anything. The only allegations that we have is that is not even the tattoos. No, it was the bull's hat was the big one.
Yeah,
The bull's hat and hoodie.
I agree. And that was what was presented as evidence in the
Right.
court case, that the court just went, no. I'm
Okay, that's
talking
not
about
enough.
when
Yeah.
the current administration sat in the Oval Office and held up pictures that were alleged
Right.
fingers.
So I have an article, and also, again, I would love to put this in the description. There's an article with where um, they brought in these police, these specialists, these gang task force specialists, and they were like, well, the tattoos are not indicative of gang membership all the time, and his tattoos specifically aren't something that any of us recognize as MS-13 tattoos. There's been arguments that the cross was a cover up. I've seen people talk about that, and that the skull was a cover up, um, et cetera. How, you know what I mean? It's like, what is how many times are we going to do these Olympic level mental gymnastics to justify this as being okay, and not even go back to the initial argument, which is he was never taken to court. He was given no due process.
Yeah.
So we can make all the speculation and to try to justify this is okay, but we're all we're doing is we're allowing MAGA to pull the argument away from what it really should be about, which is this is unconstitutional.
Well, I think that's an important point, and you and I have talked about this before. Um, every single time that you and I have engaged with a MAGA or Trump supporter in a rational, reasonable, we try, and actually we're trying to find some people who might be interested in having a rational discussion on the show.
Right.
Um, we've asked them point blank, do you support the Constitution in regard to this? And we can never get a straight answer. It
Yeah.
is, I mean, I thought Aaron was kind of playing with me when he said, no, you'll never get a straight answer. And I'm trying to have some conversations via text where I just out and out ask the question and it comes back with,
How do we know what's true?
how do we know what's true? I don't know. Maybe the Supreme Court could give that answer.
Yeah.
Or then we end up talking about moon landings and the JFK assassination. I mean, I cannot
Yeah.
fathom some of this. So I think the issue is we're back. I mean, Aaron, I feel kind of like deja vu. Our second or third episode was, are we going to follow the Constitution or not?
Yeah. Well, and that's you'll never again, and like I told you then, you'll never get a straight answer. I have sat in channels and talked with Trump supporters. I've watched online debates like ad nauseum with these people, and it's interesting to see the text discussions that you've gotten into because it is so reminiscent of those debates.
It's gobbledygook.
Yeah. It would be like if they do this thing for those that aren't familiar, where it'd be like if I asked mom, I'd be like, "Mom, what's your favorite color?" And then mom would go, "Well, what is a color? If we talk about the spectrum of colors and all the colors that you can possibly find, how are we to narrow down
Or
one color?"
really is.
Yes, I want one color. That's how they answer these questions. It's never like, "Oh, well, like, what's your favorite color?" "Oh, my favorite color is red." It just becomes this
And
like,
I want to, I know we're talking about the Fifth
yeah,
Amendment, but we really have to go a step further. I believe that the current administration's platform of hate has become a cancer within its supporters' minds and feeds on the lizard brain fear and hate of anything that is other. And so it's easy to blame, okay, people with what I mean, what was it in Nazi Germany? People who are not blonde hair and blue eyed are not enough. So, it's general now where it's anybody who's immigrant. Now it's the, immigrants, but when is it going to be, they're going to move over to the Jews and then they're going, I mean, right now it's immigrants and anybody that's part of the LGBTQ plus community.
yeah.
Well, next it's going to
Well,
go.
and that I posted the poem the that poem by Pastor Hi, I don't know how to say his name. He
First
was
they,
yeah. What's that?
is that the one that says first they came for so and so?
Yeah. So that guy was a pastor in Germany, and he wrote that poem in 1946 after the end of the war. Um, and I posted it recently on Threads actually because first I don't know people weren't paying attention whenever they were like scooping up immigrant students like they were black bagging immigrant students. Some people were. I'm not saying, but a lot of people weren't. And now this is like that next step in that. in that thing is like you could say like so like if we were to go back to be like, well, first they came for the student activists.
I will say if I'm not mistaken, the Supreme Court did uphold that they could proceed with deportation hearings
Yes.
on guy. And apparently
Yes.
there was some hate speech that they said he engaged in. I'm not clear on exactly
Yeah, well, and for some of these students, it's like the president is also within his rights to revoke visas, and some of them are here on student visas. And so if they're here on student visas
oh, and
and
I did
they're
hear about
activists,
how there was, I mean, this is getting tricky too, because there was a student whose visa was canceled. He was not notified, and they arrested him 4 days after they canceled his visa.
right. And I mean,
We talk
this
about,
all,
yeah,
yeah,
but this is where any fascist regime, this is why the rule of law and following the Constitution. I mean, wouldn't you rather err on the side of caution, right? But because he has, I believe the current administration has whipped his followers up into a frenzy of hate, it's really easy to, I mean, I could read to you, I mean, I could read to our, I should say, our listeners, our viewers. What are they? I guess they're viewers, aren't they?
yeah, viewers, listeners,
I can read just
followers. Followers
followers.
is probably the right word.
70. Hey, we're at 73.
Wow.
I remember when I
That's
was
awesome.
telling you that we were at
We
19.
were, yeah, yeah.
We're at 19. Isn't that the
I
best?
have the poem if you want me to read it, by the way. And the guy that wrote his name is he was Pastor Martin Niemöller. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's called First They Came, and he wrote it in 1946.
Absolutely read it.
Yeah, so if you haven't, so the poem goes like this. It says, first they came for the communist, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
Exactly. And this is why I think there's this division between, and this ties in beautifully. Hang on. This ties in beautifully to one of the things that the gentleman that I'm talking to, his first name's Rush, and he says to me, why do people focus on saving the criminal element and allowing lawful people to die? What's the reasoning? And why are Democrats so opposed to deportation? And I think the disconnect between the beliefs on both sides of the table is I am not trying to I am not against deportation. If you come over here and you go through due process and you know, have not followed the law, I'm sorry, you know, you got to go
Yeah,
back.
especially if you're here on like a temporary stay, if you're here seeking asylum, if you're like if basically it's as I guess crappy as it can sound, if you're here on our good graces and then you break the law, especially in some of the insane ways that MS-13 is known for doing, I mean, I'm not saying that I would want you sent off to an El Salvadorian prison, although if you're from if you're an MS-13, you're probably from El Salvador. That's where you'd wind up. But I, the breakdown is not that people are being deported. The breakdown is that people are being deported with zero due process. It's
Process.
just
And I'm not, I mean, I also, my argument back to Rush was due process confirms or proves
yeah,
the
it
innocence of
verifies that you're a criminal. You're
the
not a
whole.
criminal without it.
You're making someone a criminal because it appears on, and this is very depressing or discouraging or disappointing, that the Department of Homeland Security of our government has put on its page that he is an MS-13 member just by their say so and no evidence at all. And that is at the very least heinous to misrepresent that.
Yeah.
That's the doubling down of I hate to keep saying, you know, the right or the left or the sides or whatever, but it's the doubling down. I'm just going to start calling it the platform of hate and fear. And I really think that we need to push that out more aggressively, that
Yeah.
it's hate and fear. It isn't that we're having political differences. Political differences are about, you know, who to tax, how much to tax, how do we spend our tax money, what roads get fixed, you know,
And we talked about this a couple episodes ago. We
being
there's the I remember there was a time in our in not too long ago. Um, well, I guess it was long ago. There was a time 15, 20 years ago where political differences in my mind were legitimately political differences. You had a problem, we both agreed it was a problem, and the means by which we solved that problem is where we disagreed.
exactly.
And that's not where we're at anymore. Now,
Now we're
you don't
talking,
even think now I have a problem and you don't even think it's a problem.
you don't even think it's a problem, or you think that an executive order is going to negate someone's humanity, or
Yeah, I
you
mean, yeah, like way further.
and
Yeah.
to determine reality because of an executive order. So I think part of the point is we talk about this Fifth Amendment. If we have to speak up, every single person has to speak up about this particular issue, or it will affect you. Your child will, you know, go to college and speak out against something, and they will not have due process because the government will have gotten the right to deport anybody, anytime, anywhere for anything.
Yeah. And I mean, I just went back and reread some of the things that you shared with me in that conversation you had. And it is we don't have to get into it, but it
No,
is
we can't.
so
I think it's important that anybody who watches what we do here is we are literally trying to understand the mindset of Trump supporters, MAGA, and it is literally one of the most difficult things I think I've ever had to do. I mean,
yeah,
not because and it was interesting because he had said, you know, that you hate Trump supporters or what. I don't hate anybody. That's
no.
why I'm so opposed to a platform of hate. I don't see your logic and I disagree with your hate and I will push back energy for energy, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying things like, what's really true? Well, I don't know. Facts? Maybe facts
Yeah.
would be considered as true.
Yeah, and then this is that is such a regular deflection tactic that Trump supporters try to use all the time is that they try to say, well, how do you know those facts are true? And it to me, it's like a failure to understand how facts are obtained, right? It's like there are people that went out that and got or are experts, depending on what the fact is, that are able to come and say, this is what the fact is. And then yours, because you don't like it, they'll be quick to be like, well, this other person who's also an expert says something different.
Well, I mean, we could pick 100 things right now.
Yeah.
Some of them are very serious, like COVID, where, you know, the government has taken down the COVID site and has replaced it with a a
Which
website.
is so insane. He is the guy that pushed the vaccine. He even
I mean,
tried to be
I
like,
mean,
this vaccine is great. I was the one that did it.
yeah, yeah, he's one. I mean, and then throwing Fauci under the bus, like he was so terrible. So I think the issue here is when you have someone who says, believe me, trust me, what I say is true, and I'm going to surround myself with a bunch of cronies who are going to echo everything I say, and you don't fact check that person, you know, therein lies the slippery
Well,
slope, the ice that goes on to the slippery slope. You
yeah. Well,
know, let's be honest, for anybody who's watching, we're talking hopeful resistance, and we're talking about the Fifth Amendment and the loss of due process. Folks, if you're wondering what the action item for you is, we always have a list of resistant, passive, not passive, peaceful resistance connections that you can make, how to call your senator and representative, how to protest peacefully, how to put out educational cards. The oh, have you been following Indivisible? That's a ridiculous
yeah.
fast growing group. You should find one.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
and you
did
know
them.
that
Yeah, I did them, and then I signed up for I have it bookmarked. I'm still getting their Veterans Against Trump is kind of the big thing, but they're one of the largest grassroots movements for veterans that are actively against Trump. And I sent you a link, and I have to go find it again. Um,
and I
Common
think
Defense is
oh,
the name
common
of it.
defense. You
Yeah.
know, one of the things that I think is super critical I don't like, I'm just, clearly, I don't like the current administration. I don't like
Hmm.
anybody that he's selected. I respect the position of president. If he was following the law, process, procedures, was working the Congress the way that you work the Congress to get things done, not taking a wrecking ball.
Especially with the majority that he's got in Congress.
This is the most mystifying thing to me. You have the majority. You don't have to go through with a wrecking ball and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I don't have, I didn't like him the first time. I like him even less now. I don't wish him anything deadly or ill. But I want it to be super clear. My huge uh opposition is I believe love pushes back against hate and fear. And that's number one. Number two is we either follow the Constitution and the rule of law, or we are following fascism and dictatorship. It
Right.
is, there's no middle ground here. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think we have to continue to remind people it sucks right now to be in the United States if you are I believe, a rational person who's not operating in your lizard brain. But Aaron, I mean, you went to Afghanistan and fought, for the United States, risked your life and limb and lost, you know, members of your battalion, I guess is what they called that.
Yeah, and you mean in World War II? I mean,
No, I mean when you were in Afghanistan.
oh, wait, you mean like, sorry, I was trying to find something and
Oh, okay, let's go back.
I caught the
I'm
battalion.
talking about the
Sorry.
fact that you fought for the Constitution and you were in a
Yeah.
war
Yeah.
situation and you lost friends
So,
and stuff.
yeah, and I
The
mean,
whole point is you come back here and you're having to look at your own government that sent you to
I'm
fight
like,
for,
yeah.
you
And I
know,
mean, and we could people would get into the argument of were we fighting for um, the United States? Were we fighting? My thing, whenever it comes to what was happening in Afghanistan, is that it's more about like it's the fight for American idealism.
yes.
If that makes sense. Like we weren't fighting for American citizens. The fight was against.
Whoever said you were fighting for American
Oh,
citizens?
I mean, people get it in their head that's like, especially MAGA. They really hate that we're ever involved in foreign wars. They think that we should only be worried about what happens here at
That's what
home.
Rush said. Rush says that it should
Yeah.
be, I am fine with the Constitution only applying to citizens. The safety of our citizens should be first. Americans should be first, and anybody who thinks anything different, um, you know, is a problem.
Yeah, so we're and that's another issue is like people get lost in the weeds on what it is. The United States put itself in the position of being the world police, and people will say on now the right used to not say this, but now because of Trump, they'll say, well, that should we should have never been doing that. You know, that's the same thing that the communists and the socialists will say. We should have never been doing that. The reality is we're trying to propagate American idealism everywhere, and we've not always done that in the most honorable or the right way. But
I
that's
believe that my husband would agree with that.
yeah, but that's what we've been doing. We've been pushing American idealism, and that's what we were doing in
Well,
Afghanistan.
and let's go back. It goes back to the Fifth Amendment. What is American idealism? That there are inherent rights of a
Right.
human being that the government should protect. And those
Yes.
rights are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, due process,
And
all the that you mentioned.
it's it's so insane to me that people will talk about that conservatives will continue to praise people like Reagan whenever Reagan would have fucking hated Donald Trump. He would have hated
Hated Donald.
him.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at history, if you look at how he was presented and
And just the things that he said. I mean, it, I mean, you can go look up Reagan speeches about about illegal immigrants crossing the southern border. Reagan had policies on it. He said things that were counter to what Trump says.
100%. But I will tell you, this is one of the other things that bothers me is that, and I think, this is the other thing that I find us to be in. I mean, as a retired behaviorist, I'm absolutely fascinated with the behaviors that I'm seeing right now. And if you've never read The Fourth Turning, you need to. It was written 35 years, 40 years ago, and it describes what's happening now almost in detail. I read it
Right.
in 2017, and I've been grousing about it since then, that we're headed to a crux where it'd be nice if it was handled peacefully, but I don't know that that's going to
We don't
happen.
know.
Point
Yeah.
of it being that we have we aren't bifurcated anymore. It isn't Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives. We have conservatives, we have Republicans, we have MAGA, we have Trump supporters, we have liberals, we have centrists, we have leftists. I mean,
Yeah.
we've always had these divisions, but it is becoming, golly, more volatile might be the best.
Yeah, more volatile
And
is
I
the right
think
term. And it's being driven. It's so interesting whenever we talk about how volatile politics has become, because every single time that, like, I don't care what anybody says, it is Trump and the MAGA movement that brought us here. And they'll
are
say,
you kidding?
"Oh, look,
Absolutely.
look at how angry and violent these leftists are." And to which I respond, "You're fucking A right we are. You guys are trying to violate the document that, like, has been like the founding principle for our country for 250 plus years. Like, yeah, people are fucking being violent, pissed off."
Well, and this is actually one of my points to the conversation about the Fifth Amendment. And I feel like, I think that if I just keep saying it, it's going to get through at some point, not to you, but to
Yeah,
the general population who watches the show. And we either follow the Constitution and the rule of law, or we devolve and follow and support a fascist dictatorship. And if you don't like the Constitution, there is a process by which you can change it.
correct.
If you don't like the law, there is a process by which you can change it. But the fact,
Several processes for the law, but
right? But the fact that you don't like that immigrants have rights, okay, you think that only citizens should have rights? Fine, take it up with the courts, take it up with the reason that we have the Constitution and the rule of law are bumpers. These are bumpers to keep us from devolving into chaos, anarchy, fascism, dictatorship, which are all of those are based on the whims of whoever's in charge. I don't like people with green eyes, so take them out and shoot them to
yeah.
Salvador.
Well,
You know,
and that's the thing too. I mean, is if anybody was paying attention, if anybody's, I think it's so funny whenever you listen to right-wing influencers talk about, how they're nerds for history, and then see everything that's happening right now, and then don't go, this is really similar to
well,
something else I remember reading in history.
let me tell you what
Um,
I think about right-wing influencers and what they say about. I made it through 1 minute, which is 50
wow.
50 seconds more than my previous. And what I'm seeing, and I actually just it is a power. Okay, you and I could turn this show into influencers heaven for the left by capitalizing on the hate and fear of the right.
Right.
Okay, we could stop talking about facts. We could start talking about our opinion and inflame people to hate MAGA and to hate this and to hate that. But that's just not what we're about, right?
Right.
But when you watch these right-wing influencers, they're make money. That's great, but I'll tell you what I think is even more. The lizard brain power that comes from engendering fear and hate in other people. I have hooked you when I can get you to hate the people I hate.
Right. And I mean, I don't know who you listen to. There's so many that you can easily
I
find.
honestly, I, I when I let me see if I can explain this correctly. When we set up our YouTube page and our Facebook page, the automatic feed was right wing,
It's
like
insane.
crazy right wing,
It's
like
crazy, right?
off the charts right wing. And so I went under our hopeful resistance login, and I don't know who it was. I wish I could remember. But what I was looking for was not the person, but I wanted to hear the tone. I wanted to see what they were saying. It literally just jumped into hate and fear. The
Yeah.
language, hate and fear. There were no, I mean, in the first 30 seconds, first 30 seconds, it was just random lies so, I mean, again, it's the power of grabbing people's lizard brain. And you know what makes me sad is we are no more evolved as a society, uh, culturally right now than we were 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
Our technology is better, but I mean, we hate immigrants like people hated black people, or we hate gays like during the Inquisition, they hated the Catholics hated the Protestants. I mean, it is just like, okay, your technology's better, but you're just as primitive as you were 1,000 years ago.
yeah, and cultural, yeah, that well, and some of the cultural, some of that, like those cultural pushes have happened just because there is. I find it interesting that by definition, conservatism is the recognition of uh a want to not change. Like you know how
Percent. You just keep
it's
doing it
so
the same way.
right, and I understand I can respect I guess on some level the if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I feel like the that argument only stands solid ground if you were like a straight white guy. And I you know, I'm not to be sanctimonious, but it's just like, yeah, of course. I mean, I tell my friends all the time, I mean, I know it's fucked up as it is. I know that I probably don't need to worry about what the stuff that's happening,
Now to
right?
think,
Like if I really wanted to, I could just sit around and just not give a shit.
100%. And this is the thing I've had people ask me, like, Sarah, why are you so up in arms about this? This doesn't affect you at all. I mean, this doesn't affect you. I
That
mean, you're not
that
even,
argument is
you're traveling outside of the country, you're heterosexual, you're white.
yeah.
And so why do you even care about this? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe because I don't know, compassionate and I have empathy.
Yeah, empathetic.
I care.
That's yeah.
It doesn't have to affect me personally. And honestly, oh, and another thing. We did our episode last week about the cannibal effect. Oh my God, this week with the protests that happened on yesterday, the feed today of the hate. Well, you didn't do enough. There weren't enough people, and there's people preaching against violence, and there's people who are preaching like, well, we're just going to have to get rowdier to get
Yeah.
more. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Uh, I,
It's
I
just yeah.
the only thing that I would have to say to this is I think the left, people on the left, is that the way
You
you
could
say
just I'll use those interchangeably. The
it? Okay.
left, people on the left.
The left has no leadership. We have no distinct or profound leader.
Right.
The right, of course, not only has a leader, but they have a leader who's in the news every day. There are all these right-wing influencers who are covering every fart and breath he takes.
Right.
And so I will say, for people who are without a clear-cut leader, we're doing pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Uh, but now it's getting into the real meat of, are we going to save democracy?
Right.
And I don't know where a leader's going to come to help fight the fight.
Well, and there's definitely there's a big concern for that aspect of it. There's other big concerns, at least on the like on my side, the veteran side of things,
Mhm.
because it's like at what point um is there going to be division or unification with the US military? Because
Because
at
I call right now,
furthermore,
I see calls right now for the military to step up and do something.
Yeah. And or furthermore, you have the National Guards of every state, right? Because their oath is to the Constitution, much like it is for general forces, but it's also to the state governor, to the state constitution and governor of the state. Um, you
This
know
is
what?
how
You know
the
what?
Civil
It,
War
it
started, isn't it?
yeah, it's really difficult to watch with where things are right now. But if you get time, you should watch the Civil War movie. Um, it its perspective is from war journalists who have covered civil wars all over the world, and now they're covering the United States Civil War.
Right?
Um, and it covers the concept idea of what it would look like in such a surreal way that it makes you go, "Fuck, dude." I hope this doesn't happen.
Well, and this is
Um,
the thing. I think that as we talk about the Fifth Amendment right to due process, I think as we talk about democracy, as we talk about some of the things we're talking about, is what's it worth to you?
yeah,
I hear people talking about how they don't want to lose their jobs, and I'm like, well, would you rather lose your life or, is your family's life? I mean, we have not been in this position since the Civil War. And, I know the civil rights movement was violent
yeah.
and it did uh it did result in some improvement, but you know, um
Well, and I feel like, we're talking about this whole conversation starts with the discussion about the Fifth Amendment. And I think one thing that we should also point out is if we start seeing the erosion of something like the Fifth Amendment, it's not much further before we start seeing the erosion of the Fourth Amendment. And then we start seeing the erosion of the First Amendment. And then which, by the way, the First Amendment, if you didn't know, this First Amendment is called the amendment at which all other amendments are built upon. The
yes.
second that Trump can start sending criminals, I'm going to start putting in quotes, criminals out of the country.
I think
And he can send anybody. He could just say, "Oh yeah, that person's a criminal."
But see, that was the absolute
Yeah,
argument that they
yeah,
brought before the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court knocked down. We are at a constitutional crisis. We are at the very fringes of living in a fascist state.
right.
I think that if this doesn't get your attention, this Fifth Amendment discussion we're having, if the First Amendment discussion, if none of these discussions get your attention, I hope you enjoy fascism and dictatorship because
Yeah,
that's where we're headed. So I think um I think we've exhausted this for today, and I would love to have the conversation about tariffs when we record the next
yeah,
episode.
sure.
So for today we're not going to list wins because I've been a lazy slug. Not really lazy. We've had a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah,
I will say there are a few wins. The Supreme Court said, yes, you do need to figure out you need to facilitate his return. The second thing is that they've forbidden the government to do any more deportations under the that 1897
yeah. I know there's been talks on the floor
Alien
about
Insurrection Act or something like that.
the 1867. Yeah,
So the
it's
Supreme Court is stepping up. The Supreme Court says no. I know there's a federal court that is looking into the administration's slack response to
uh,
um, some of this stuff, as well as when they did the deportation when they were told that they shouldn't, and they said, "Oh, we're in the air, so we couldn't stop it."
yeah,
Uh,
there's some other ones that I know too is like there are ongoing discussions on the congressional floor about basically revoking the state of emergency using that act, which would stop a lot of what's happening dead in its tracks.
Let me tell you, anybody, I think the people, the Republicans who have supported Trump up to this point, I think there's a few things that are getting their attention. One, their pocketbook, the tariff thing that we need to talk
Yeah.
about, and we can, uh, go into more depth about that, but that's hit their pocketbooks. I also think that they're realizing that you succumb to the bully, he's just going to he told you he wants lunch money today, and then he's going to want next week's lunch money, and then he's going to want lunch money for a year, and
Yeah.
it's going to have to push back.
Yeah.
So I think that we're
Um,
gonna see more Republicans standing up to him,
yeah,
but hopefully uh, faster
yeah,
than
faster would be nice. There was,
effort.
and then the other one was the release of not just the American citizens that were picked up, but there were also a bunch of immigrants that were picked up that were released. They were
Yes,
picked up and they were released.
yes, and we do. I will get the list to Aaron. He turns it into a Google Doc. We post that. I don't know if I put that on our last show description or not. I will put a link. Is there a single link to all of them, or do I have to link each one?
We could do it either way. If you would like it to be where there's a link that just goes right, it's on Google Drive. There's a link that just goes right into the folder, and then we just have them all labeled by date. We could do that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
And then that way I don't have to update it every week.
Yeah, you can just do
It's
one
so
link.
it's so hard to update that one link.
I know. You gotta like copy it, and then you gotta
I know.
go over to
My
the and
finger gets
paste
so.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Remember, I'm
Um,
old. I'm old. You know that.
Also, just one other thing, but I know we're one other thing. There in 2002, there was a court or the Supreme case. Anybody who knows anything about politics, but the name of the court case is Rasul v. Bush. This was the one that was talking about the Guantanamo Bay prisoners, and whether or not they were afforded rights or protected rights by the Constitution. For those that aren't catching the theme of the episode, the Supreme Court came back and said, yes, they are protected by the Constitution, these Guantanamo Bay prisoners. So that's the link that I was going to send to you.
That's
If you want to put it in there.
absolutely. And again, I think that why we have to explain this is beyond me. The fact that you kidnap an immigrant, legal or not, and you take them out of the United States does not mean they don't have the constitutional protections. They had them before you took them. And
Right.
so the due process is afforded to them. What bothers me, I want you to explain to me why you're okay with someone not having basic civil rights. You don't get to decide
Because they're criminals,
because they're
Mom.
criminals, because they're terrorists, because well, okay, so no.
How do we know that? That's the next
That's what
that's the
due
next follow-up
process is
question.
for.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
well, and I told you there's the simple defeating argument of like, so if you don't trust the government, why is it that you're trusting the government to tell you that these guys are
Because they're
criminals?
telling me what I want to hear.
Yeah, there
Do
you
I
go.
have to explain that to
It's
you?
like if you don't trust the media, why are
They
you
hate
trusting the
the same
media?
people.
Yeah, of course. So,
What?
okay, yeah, we can wrap up. I just wanted to get those last two.
No, I mean it is the logic that we're fighting, and
Yeah.
it is mystifying and totally not.
It's the cognitive dissonance. It's the failure to own that position.
So we have pretty much covered everything we don't know and understand about the Fifth Amendment and people's responses to it, as
Yeah.
well as what we do know and our opinions about how important it is for us to sustain the integrity of the Constitution and the rule of law. It
Yeah.
is what separates us from less civilized societies. So, all right. Well, if you don't have anything else,
Not for now. There's always something.
there's so many
So
things.
many things.
All right. Well, folks, until we get together again, bye for now.